There.
Good morning, Chair Desmond. This is Sandag Production. I just want to advise you that we're actually going to start the broadcast 5 minutes early in order to capture, there's some delay before the recording starts. I just wanted to let everyone know that anything spoken at the 5-minute mark will be recorded.
Crystal, would you like to do a camera check?
I said I'm going to do reshare. That's the timer. How would that come through if we have that at the time of someone? They can hear it okay? Yeah. You look good?
Production, can you hear me?
Yep.
Thank you
Yes.
very much.
Okay, we are 1 minute out from starting broadcast. We are now live.
Just checking in.
Loud and clear. This is Sandag Production. If anyone has an open mic, if you could just mute yourself, and then when you're speaking, unmute yourself. We're trying to get this broadcast really clean.
Good morning.
Hello, Dwight from Del Mar's here.
Good morning, Christine from La Mesa.
Brian Boyle from Oceanside.
Jerry Jones from Lemon Grove.
Greg Cox from the county.
Rebecca Jones from San Marcos.
Judy Ritter from Vista.
Hi, it's Vivian, City of San Diego. Morning, everybody.
Good morning, Chair Desmond. This is Tessa. I want to confirm that all three committees do have a quorum at this time.
For all three committees?
Yes, sir.
Tessa, you're a little broken up there. Do we have a quorum, all three committees?
Yes, sir. All three committees have a quorum at this time.
All right. Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Transportation Regional Planner and Borders Committees joint meeting here today on Friday, August 7th. I'd like to say, I'm going to be serving as the chair of the meeting here today. I first want to share that we will be hosting simultaneously the translation of this meeting into Spanish, and wanted to introduce our translator for the Spanish instructions. Carlos, do you want to introduce yourself and tell how people can get to the Spanish edition?
Thank you, Chair Desmond. As has been indicated, my name is Carlos, and I will be serving as your interpreter today. To use the interpretation feature, which will be enabled after this message in English and Spanish, please scroll down to the bottom of your Zoom screen where the meeting controls appear, and you will find an interpretation icon as you're seeing on screen now. Please click on that and select English as your language. I will now repeat this message in Spanish. Muy buenos días. Se va a contar con servicio de interpretación simultánea para esta sesión. El servicio se va a habilitar en cuanto termine este mensaje. Para hacer uso del servicio, desplácese al fondo de la pantalla de Zoom donde aparecen los controles y verá un icono de interpretación, un globo terráqueo como el que ve en pantalla, y seleccione Spanish, español como su idioma. Gracias. Thank you, Chair Desmond.
Okay, was that? All right, thank you, Carlos. Was that very broken up or is that just me at my end? Tessa?
I believe it's at your end.
Sounds good on my end.
Sounds good to
Yes,
me.
sir. It was fine.
My
for-
It must be at my end. Okay. I may have to relog in later in the meeting. Okay. So thank you, Carlos. Appreciate that. If you could, everyone could please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. You can stand or do whatever you want for the Pledge of Allegiance here. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you, everyone. I also wanted to welcome the chairs of the Transportation Committee, the Borders Committee and the Regional Planning. Mayor Mary Salas is here today. We also have Mayor and Chair Dedina is also here today, and Chair Dedina, did you want to have a few opening remarks? Do we have Mayor Dedina on board?
I'm not hearing any audio from Mayor Dedina.
All right, I'm not hearing him. Yeah. Tessa, are we hearing him? Because I'm not.
No, sir, Chair, Mayor Dedina, you are unmuted, but we're not hearing your sound.
All right, let's
Perhaps
move on.
you should Log out and log in.
So
No, I'm not hearing Desmond.
Desmond, we've lost your audio. And it looks like your video is stuck.
who is mine?
Yes, sir.
All right, I think I'm coming back on. I'm getting a stronger signal. I had to change to a different whatever Wi-Fi. Hopefully, am I back? Okay, thank you. So was Mayor Dedina there or not?
Yes, sir, he was, but his audio was not working. I asked him to log out and log back in.
Sorry about the delay. Can you guys hear me at all?
Yeah,
Yes,
we
sir.
got Mayor. Go ahead.
So sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened. Anyway, briefly, as chair of the Borders Committee, I've always been proud of the fact that we had the triple whammy at the Borders Committee. Sorry about all these glitches today. We've had the triple whammy at the Borders Committee. We're improving economic development by building infrastructure on the border, get people across the border faster. Number two, we're improving air quality and the quality of, actually number two, air quality and environmental quality by reducing emissions from all those trucks that are crossing the border. And then number three, obviously, we're making life better for all the folks who live on the border, especially the kids in South County who have some of the highest rates of asthma in California, if not the country. So That's good news. And I think what this pandemic and economic crisis has shown is we need to double down on infrastructure. We need to double down on public and environmental health. And we need to double down on making sure that the people who have the least get the most in terms of investment in infrastructure and quality of life. And I'm proud of the Borders Committee and thinking about that regionally and binationally and working together across the border. That's more important than ever. So pleased to be here, but pleased that Sandag has really embraced that role for more than 20 years to really think about how we bring people together, but actually make things better at every level, including that what has always been the sort of elusive environmental end, and we seem to do that very well. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Appreciate that. I'd like to remind the members and the public on our process for both members and public comments. Primary members, those of you on all these committees, if you could use your cameras when you want to be called on or you wish to speak, turn your camera on at the appropriate time when we do go into member comments, and then we'll be able to call on you based on seeing your camera, your picture up. And then so then I'll be able to recognize you, and I'd like to ask our legal counsel, John Kirk, to give a quick reminder to how the public comments will work today. Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Chair. The methods for public comments are twofold today, and they are summarized on the cover of today's agenda. Members of the public may comment via the Zoom platform when comments are called for by the chair. Follow those instructions to raise your hand and make it known that you would like to speak, and the chair will call on you. You may also make public comments by telephone by calling into the number and following those directions, which are to press, I believe it's *9 on your phone to indicate, and you will be called on then by the last 3 digits of your telephone number. All comments made, whether those are emailed or they are made via the Zoom platform or telephone, will be made a part of today's meeting record.
All right, thank you, Mr. Kirk. Appreciate it. Okay, we're going to move on to item number 1. First item to the day. This is public comments. I'm going to ask members of the public who wish to offer a comment not related to matters today on the agenda to raise your hand at this time to do so. And I guess, Tessa, if you could let me know if there's any public comment or any speakers that want to speak.
Thank you, Chair. I do not see any raised hands from the public at this time.
Okay, how about from the committee members for things that are not on the agenda today? Any committee members? No, okay. All right. So we'll move on to then item 2. This is a report. It's going to be a fairly lengthy report. It's featured agenda today. The Vision for 2021 Regional Plan, a deep dive into the details. There's going to be 2 10-minute breaks within the presentation. They've kind of put in here because it's apparently about 90-minute presentation. At one end of the transit section, another one at the end of the presentation before we go into before we go into member public comments. So I'm going to call on our Executive Director, Hassan Akradik, to go ahead and start us off with the staff presentation.
Thank you, Chair Desmond, and thank you to Chair Salas and Chair Dedina. And good morning to all of you, members of the committees. This is a big deal for our organization and our region. And I want you to know that I have been here for 20 months. And this is the most proud that I have felt. I am so proud of these planners and data analysts and the work they have done. And I'm sure you're going to agree with me at the end of this presentation why I am proud. They have built a vision for our region that goes to 2050. It's a vision our region can see, explore, and get excited about. I remember seeing a futuristic image of a city on the cover of National Geographic, this one. And that was almost 20 months ago. It was inspiring because it showed a city whose network created opportunities for all. The San Diego region deserves that. I showed the magazines to the planners, and I challenged them. I challenged them and I said, reimagine the transportation system for our region. Don't draw lines on the maps based on previous plan. They didn't. They came up with the 5 big moves: complete corridors, transit leap, flexible fleets, mobility hub, and the next operating system. We quickly realized that the 5 big moves were one solid strategy. Pull one out, and the transportation network failed. We set up the Vision Lab on the 20th floor of our building. It is clear and bright and offers views that light the imagination. It was symbolic of what we all want for Sandag, to be a place where we think differently, where we welcome transparency and sunshine, where we don't do things the way they have always been done, where we find new solutions to solve issues important to our communities. We invited stakeholders and guests to collaborate with the planners. We asked them for their opinion, challenged them to demand the best. We hosted many of you to visit the Vision Lab and discuss the work the planners were doing. We showed you our initial work and helped webinars to explain our processes. We established a vision advisory panel made of brilliant minds in the technology field. We ran ideas by them and used their insight to make them stronger. We interviewed residents and asked them what they need, asked them what their children and grandchildren need. We asked them to imagine the system that could provide them access to opportunities. We created videos to show how the 5 big moves work together and how it could look across the region. We mapped the employment center and the population centers, and we figured out who was driving where and when. We checked and rechecked our work and our data. We have our work and our data quality control checked. I told the team, I told every employee here at Sandag, take risks, do something we have never done. Imagine the impossible and make it possible. And you know what? They did. And then the pandemic hit, and the office went virtual like many of you. But it didn't stop the team. They crunched more data about teleworking and traffic patterns. They threw it into the mix. They worked many, many hours, overtime, to make sure that this pandemic would not stop the work that we are doing. Our chief economist, Ray Major, and his team reported on the severe economic impacts, especially to Black minority communities. What his data reiterated is how important good transportation options are to social equity. We have established Sandag as one agency that have the models to be used at the state and national level. Different modes of transportation are the gateway to opportunity for many people. Social equity is of paramount importance in this plan. Simply put, we reaffirmed why this vision matters now more than ever. Do you see why I am proud? Every person who works in Sandag has had something to do with this. I worked in many public and private agencies in a career that spanned 30 years. By far, this is the most professional, intelligent group of people that they believe in what they do, and they do it so well that they are used as an example. They do that because we know this vision is important for our region. Before I turn it to our planning director, Colleen Clemenson, and Antoinette and their teams, let me say this. We have done a lot of work. We still have more work to do before our deadline to submit the regional transportation plan in November of 2021. This vision is not that plan. That's still in the works. This vision is not about projects. Those will be in the plan. This vision is not about the money. Those discussions will be done once we finalize the plan and the project. This vision is the foundation for all of that. This vision and what we have created based on the data and community feedback we have collected over the past many months and presenting today. This vision is for the people who live here and love San Diego County. This vision is for them. This vision is for generations that do not know yet, that we do not know yet, but who will look back and be proud of the work we have done today. I hope you will feel as proud as I am today. And I want to conclude by saying this. Of course, some of you might say I'm biased, but this is my 9th time I work in plans for big regions. The staff here have created much more opportunities for planning than any will ever imagine. The state of California is looking for direction when it comes to transportation. Many places in the nations are doing too. This team that you're going to hear from today is setting that direction for our state and our nation. And with that, our able and amazing planning director, Colleen Clemenson.
Thank you, Hassan, and members and chairs of the Transportation, Regional Planning, and Borders Committee. My team and I are so pleased to present the details of a bold new transportation vision to you today. A vision that reimagines our transportation future, meets our mandates, addresses congestion, and addresses social equity. A transportation vision that's convenient, equitable, and resilient to change. This team, and I say the whole Sandag team, has spent the last 15 months poring through data, reviewing your suggestions, reviewing mounds of public input, and researching the latest innovations in transportation, seeking the best options to bring you a vision that meets our mandates and addresses the things that are most important to us. So today, you will see how the 5 big moves have shaped this vision: the complete corridors, transit leap, mobility hubs, flexible fleets, and the operating system. These 5 big moves that all come together to create a bold new vision. We'll also share with you today the process that has been used, the human-centered design approach, which really puts people at the forefront of this planning effort. As Hassan mentioned in his opening remarks, none of us could have imagined just 4 or 5 months ago where we would find ourselves in the midst of a worldwide pandemic. And there are many unknowns. How long will this last? What will be the impact on the economy? When will people want to take public transit again? At the same time, there are a lot of things that we do know. People are still driving, and traffic is increasing throughout the region. Where we live and where our employment centers are, that's fixed. And we do know that at some point we will come out of this. And this agency is responsible for delivering a regional plan by the end of 2021. So with that in mind, I'm pleased to share with you the agenda for today. We will begin with an overview of the data-driven planning process, share the details of the complete corridors, and the details of Transit Leap. As the chair mentioned in his opening remarks, we are also proposing a 10-minute break so that you can get up and stretch your legs. And when you come back, we will go through the details of the Mobility Hub network and the supporting flexible fleets, as well as the next operating system. We'll wrap up and then provide you with an additional 10-minute break before moving into the committee discussion and public comment. The amazing team who you'll be hearing from today include Antoinette Meyer, our Director of Mobility and Innovation. Antoinette will cover the data-driven process, human-centered design, as well as the next operating system. Tueri Faola, our very able Regional Plan Project Manager, along with Alex Estrella, our Technology Systems Expert, will present to you the complete network of complete corridors. Jennifer Williamson, our Principal Transit Planner, will present you the details of Transit Leap, a state-of-the-art transit system for the San Diego region. Crystal Ayala and Marissa Mangden will also be presenting on mobility hubs and flexible fleets. The Sandag Board of Directors has provided this region an amazing opportunity to re-envision our transportation future. With that in mind, today we are here to talk about the vision. The vision which sets forth a strategy for the 2021 regional plan. We will work closely with you on making this strategy and turning that into a plan, working very closely with you and the Board of Directors to put together the revenue to help support the plan that the Board of Directors will be asked to approve this fall. So thank you for your time today, and with that, I turn it over to Antoinette.
Thank you so much for the wonderful introduction, Colleen, and good morning to you all. I know that I speak on behalf of the entire vision planning team when I say just how excited we are to be here today and to finally have the opportunity to share with you all of the work that we've been doing over the last year. So when we started this process not that many months ago, the 5 big moves were really high-level concepts for how we might address congestion and meet our regulatory requirements and really start to take advantage of technology trends that have been transforming transportation over the last decade. But since that time, and you'll see today that the 5 big moves have evolved into a vision for a complete transportation network that makes the most of our current infrastructure. To get to this point, the team has gone through a very thoughtful process using data and public input in ways that we never have before, and you'll get to hear directly from the team leads later on in the presentation. But first, I want to recap the journey that we've been on over the last year. So the way in which we developed the plan is really unique and visionary. So the vision came together over 3 phases. The first phase was focused on developing the 5 big move concepts to address really specific problems. We listened to people, we examined a lot of data really closely to understand how people want to move around the region and what those critical connections are that people need to make, and then where the gaps exist in the system today. The second phase was focused then on problem solving. So the team started to build out initial networks to solve the problems that they discovered and to address challenges like reducing congestion and travel times, while at the same time trying to reduce vehicle miles traveled. And then in the third phase, we refined those networks. So the team brought in new data, new analytical methods, and even outside experts to rigorously test and fine-tune the solutions that they had identified. And to complete all of this work on a very compressed schedule, we used a project management technique that's called sprint planning. Tech companies often use this approach for product development because it breaks down really complex projects on very tight schedules into short segments called sprints. This makes the project a little bit more manageable, and it provides some flexibility to adapt to change as the project evolves. It also requires a very high degree of collaboration, which made the Vision Lab the perfect space for the team to work together. We spent a lot of time in the Vision Lab together. It became my home away from home, and I really miss the days of being there with the team, but I'm glad that we have the virtual tools to be able to continue this work remotely. So talking with as many people as possible has been an incredibly important part of this planning process. We delivered hundreds of presentations to different organizations and associations across the region. I'm sure that you participated in one or more of those presentations. And we also organized a number of workshops with different stakeholder groups. We had a workshop with all of our SANDAG working groups that's featured here in this slide. We had a tribal transportation workshop that Verona graciously hosted for us. We had discussions with some of the largest employers in the region through workshops. We had a cross-border mobility workshop in the city of Tijuana. And we had regular coordination meetings with our transportation partners, Caltrans and MTS and NCTD. We also built on years of public involvement, and we provided new opportunities for people to provide their input and to learn about the 5 big moves. More than 1,400 viewers logged in and watched our very popular interactive webinar series on the 5 big moves last summer. And our network of community-based organizations from all across the region conduct outreach to vulnerable populations who are underserved and underrepresented. They support us by getting information out to their constituents and then by bringing community input back to the planning team. And our Vision Lab was incredible for public engagement. We had hundreds of people in open houses. We hosted student groups that wanted to learn about transportation and regional planning. And we had regular community hours where members of the public came up and met with the planning team. They explored the data and the tools that we were using and shared their thoughts and ideas. To engage residents through more focused conversations, we used a new method that's called human-centered design. Like sprint planning, this is a technique that we borrowed from the private sector. Companies have used human-centered design for years to develop products that are user-friendly. It involves really understanding the problems that people face and then developing ideas for solutions that address those problems. So you might be familiar with the companies HelloFresh and Venmo. They recognized problems that everyday people faced, and then they developed human-centered design solutions to make their customers' lives easier. So having fresh food and an easy recipe delivered to your door reduces the need to have to go to the grocery store and fit meal planning into your really busy schedule. And there's no need to have to go to the bank to get cash when you can simply and securely exchange money through your smartphone. We used human-centered design to identify transportation-related problems and then to test solutions with a diverse cross-section of residents from across the region. Rather than having a one-time event like a workshop, we were able to have ongoing conversations with people who didn't typically participate in the planning process. So a few folks that we talked to were actually willing to share their thoughts on camera, and we're really excited to share a video with you so you can hear directly from some of the residents that participated in the vision development process.
My commute experience when I'm in rush hour is horrible. You know, even if I'm going 3 to 5 miles, it can take me up to 40 minutes sometimes to get to work.
Sometimes environmentally conscious ways of transportation or ways of living aren't accessible, either just like physically not accessible to me or like money-wise, I don't have the money to access this type of, I guess, transportation.
I hope my kid doesn't need to depend on gasoline anymore in the future, and then he will still feel safe riding his bike in the community and just grow up happy.
Transportation that considers not just the everyday working person, but also maybe that senior citizen who needs to make the doctor's appointment at a certain time, but because of a lack of transportation can't make it.
I'm not in favor of expanding areas where we live. I think if there's a way to build up instead of out, I think that makes a lot more sense environmentally. And then to work on the public transit infrastructure instead of building new highways and adding new cars to an already clogged system.
What you need to do is forget that you have a car. How are you going to get from this place to this place? How do you want to get there?
If you present me with an option that is superior to the current method of transportation I'm using, I'm naturally going to gravitate to it, and I won't be alone. There'll be widespread adoption.
Finding new solutions for getting around the San Diego region starts with understanding the needs of each community. That's the heart of human-centered design. SANDAG is combining community input with advanced analytics to illuminate an innovative and sustainable future for transportation. We're thinking holistically about optimizing current solutions and integrating new technologies that unite to offer you greater choices. Options that will make transportation faster, more accessible, flexible, and smarter. Now is our time to be forward-thinking. We have an opportunity to do things differently. A chance to be bold.
I love San Diego. I love my community. I love Old Town. I mean, it's important to take an interest in where you live.
And it would be great if we didn't have to spend hours and hours in the car in 20 or 30 years.
I'm extremely optimistic about where San Diego's headed. It's a great community. Even having lived here for several years, I still have little moments where I'll be driving home, the sun setting over the ocean, and I still feel a little bit of gratitude that I live here.
So through all of our outreach, there were some common themes that emerged. And while none of this information is new or surprising, it really confirms what we've been hearing from the public for many years. So we heard a lot about transit and how it doesn't work particularly well for most people today. Many people have expressed concerns that transit vehicles and transit stations don't feel safe and lack adequate security. And we hear a lot of comments about transit taking too long and not being frequent enough, or the lack of connections to get people to and from transit. Residents feel like the transit network is incomplete. It doesn't connect them to where they need to go or to where they want to go. The lack of a true transit connection to the airport is something we hear quite a lot about. And that slow and infrequent transit service really impacts the quality of life for the residents who rely on public transportation for their everyday transportation needs. And many of these residents are the essential service workers who we've all been relying on to get us through the pandemic. The lack of school bus service is something that's also very challenging. Transporting kids to school really complicates parents' commutes, and it's particularly difficult for parents that don't have a vehicle. It also creates serious traffic around schools and unsafe conditions. And speaking of safety, we've heard from many people that they really enjoy riding a bike or taking a scooter, but they're fearful of riding on roads with cars and they would like to have safer infrastructure. And distracted driving has made people feel even more vulnerable. We've also heard that there's a need for regulations for shared mobility services like the dockless bikes and the scooters because they can be a nuisance and they can create unsafe conditions when they're not well managed. And people plan their lives around traffic and they avoid certain areas altogether. Sereno Valley is one area that we heard a lot about people avoiding during certain times of the day. Saving time is important for everyone. Nobody wants to give up time with their families or doing the things that they love for a long and stressful commute. And everyone, including those who prefer the privacy of their own car, wants their commute to be easy, they want it to be comfortable, and they want it to be reliable and predictable. So because we're planning for the future and technology is evolving incredibly quickly, we assembled a panel of industry experts to provide input on technology solutions that offer new opportunities that weren't previously available to us for transportation plans. Our Vision Advisory Panel consists of 11 Southern California industry leaders that represent key sectors like wireless communications and clean technology, connected and autonomous vehicles, and new mobility services. The panel provided insights into how technology and the better use of data could make our transportation system more adaptable and more resilient to changes in the future. They also provided input about how the business model for transportation is really changing and how public-private partnerships could play a larger role in the future, perhaps helping to accelerate the schedule of some projects or making costs of projects a little more affordable. All of this input helped us to really shape the 5 Big Move concepts and begin to imagine a future where the transportation system provides a better experience for everyone. This illustration demonstrates a typical highway that could be transformed into a complete corridor that creates space for all modes and leverages technology to really keep people and goods moving. Advancements in charging infrastructure could allow for inductive charging to be embedded in our roadways, accelerating and facilitating that transition to clean electric vehicles. And the full range of Transit Leap services are provided dedicated space that makes them a little bit more faster and frequent and reliable. And similarly, the full range of flexible fleets are provided dedicated space. There's safe infrastructure for small micromobility and HOV lanes that make rideshare and microtransit more competitive. And behind the scenes, the next operating system is using data and technology to really manage the system. Lanes could be dedicated to different uses depending upon demands throughout the day. So at certain hours, lanes could be dedicated to freight or transit or higher occupancy modes. Or if there's an incident, lanes could be restricted to emergency vehicles. When you manage the system in this way, it minimizes those stop and go conditions that increase vehicle emissions and congestion and delays. In mobility hubs come in all shapes and sizes. This is obviously a very urban example, but at their core, all mobility hubs, regardless of their size or where they're located, are complete communities where a variety of transportation options come together and it is easy and safe to get around. Mobility hub communities are anchored by Transit Leap services and they offer amenities that make taking transit more convenient and even enjoyable. So now we're going to switch gears and we're going to explore all of the different types of data that inform the vision development process. We used a wide range of data, from employment data to census data, survey data, anonymized cell phone data, to really help visualize the transportation patterns in our region and those critical connections that people need to make every day. So we started with analyzing work trips because they're the most predictable. They happen the same time of the day, same day of week, and they cause the greatest peak period congestion and delay. In fact, about 1/3 of all trips in the region are work related. So the map on the left shows where people live, and the darker the color, the more people living in that particular area. And the map on the right shows our region's largest employment centers. These are our Tier 1 and Tier 2 employment centers, and when combined, they make up about 40% of the non-military jobs in our region. We then needed to make the connection between the two, between where people live and where they work. So we used census data to make those connections. First, we divided the region up into 100-acre areas called hex bins, and those are the little hexagons you see there in the map on the left. And then we aggregated population and employment data into those hex bins so we could start to generate lines between where people live and where they work. And then we grouped those lines so we could really start to identify the highest concentration of trips to those major employment centers. Now let's take a look at this at the regional scale. So the blue dots there are those major employment centers, and the lines on the map on the left show all the people from all over the region that are traveling to their jobs in those employment centers each day. That's a lot of lines though, so we simplified on the map on the right and we grouped those lines so you could really start to see where the most commute trips are happening in the region. We understand that work trips are only part of the picture though, and that there are a lot of other transportation needs that people have. So in order to look at non-work trips, we used anonymous cell phone data to do the same type of origin and destination analysis. So we know that a lot of people cross the border every day. So we looked at trips coming from the border region, and in the map on the left, you can see where those trips are headed in. Our parks and our beaches are popular destinations for residents and visitors alike. So we looked at this data to see how people are accessing resources like Mission Bay and Balboa Park, as you can see in the map on the right. Our military bases are major regional employment centers that attract thousands of workers each day. So in the map on the left, you can see all of the trips going into the bases across the region. And then when we aggregate all of this data, we really start to combine all of the lines on the map. You can start to see that the largest portion of the trips are in the western third of the region, and a significant number of those trips are using our north-south corridors. So visualizing the data in this way was incredibly helpful to the planning team to have a network perspective and to start to identify a broad set of improvements as opposed to isolated projects focused on a single bottleneck. So for example, those heavily trafficked north-south corridors, those might be good candidates for more managed lanes and higher capacity transit. We also looked at demographic data to assess just how equitable our transportation system is. So a few weeks ago, you may have joined us for the presentation on what we're learning from COVID. And one of the key findings that I shared was that low income and minority workers are more likely to be essential workers who depend on transit and aren't able to telework. Today, only 7% of our low income residents have easy access to fast and frequent transit service. 20% of transit riders don't have a car, and they spend twice as long commuting in transit than people who drive to work. 10% of our population has a disability, and many disabled people have specialized transportation needs, and we've heard that those needs aren't being fully met today. And our population is aging. 13% of the region's residents will be 75 years or older by 2050. So we need to be planning now for a transportation system that will keep our seniors mobile, active, and connected to their communities and services. We also considered environmental factors. Transportation is the largest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions that lead to climate change. If we ignore it, temperatures and sea level will continue to rise, and this means longer and more intense heat waves and a greater risk of devastating wildfires and floods. So at this point, I am happy to hand the presentation over to the team leads who used all of this data to develop solutions for a complete network that responds to what we heard from people and what the data told us. So we're going to start with Tueri and Alex, who led Complete Corridors. Tueri, do you want to take it away?
Yes, good morning, and thank you, Antoinette. So I'm Tueri, and I'll start our network discussion talking about Complete Corridors. As Antoinette explained, data played a large role in how we looked at creating the Complete Corridors network. Of the 5 big moves, listening to community input and working with our partner agencies, we knew that we needed to focus on creating a network that would add capacity, improve reliability and safety, especially on our rural corridors, and allow people to have choices so that they can decide how they want to spend their spare time, whether it be like me with their family and friends, or doing the things that they love, rather than being forced to sit in traffic and have long commutes. With this in mind, we began to develop the Complete Corridors network, and I'll start off by talking about our highways, and then I'll turn it over to Alex to talk about our local corridors. So it can't be said enough that a lot of data was used throughout this planning process. In addition to all the data and community input that Antoinette spoke about earlier, we also reviewed existing highway data. If you look at the table here on your left, you can see some of that data. We looked at trip distances, daily traffic volumes, travel delay, and a lot more data. But this information helped us to group together corridors that had similar trip travel characteristics. So for example, here on this map, you can see that we grouped together our major north-south corridors of the Interstate 5, the 805 and the 15, and these are our interregional corridors. They're typically used for traveling longer distances and are important for goods movement within our region, especially for moving goods across our borders. And as you can see here in this table, during the peak hours, these corridors carry the most people, and they also account for 2/3 of our freeways vehicles miles travel, otherwise known as VMT, and delay during our peak hours. So similarly, we looked at urban corridors that many people use and many of us use traveling between our urban and suburban communities and between where we live and work. And in this table, you'll see that the urban corridors make up approximately 1/3 of the region's freeway VMT, vehicles mile travel, and delay during those peak hours. And finally, we looked at data on rural corridors. So rural corridors, they are vital for our residents that and our tribal nations that live in the eastern part of our county. They serve as critical emergency evacuation routes for them and access for our emergency responders. And public input really told us that safety is a very important factor for people who use these corridors daily. And as seen here, you can see that rural corridors, they don't contribute as much vehicles mile travel or delay. It's actually a little less than 5% during those peak hours, but they are used very similar in trip length as we saw in the prior slide to our urban corridors. So taking all of that data and everything that we heard from people into consideration, we proposed a network that really imagines seamless connections using managed lanes on our highways and really focuses on improving safety and access to those important rural corridors. So this map shows the possibility of a complete system of managed lanes that could operate very similar to what you may have experienced if you've driven on the I-15 express lanes. Maybe you've traveled on the I-15 as a carpool, you've used our rapid service that has transit priority access, or you've even taken it as a solo driver, paying the toll using Fast Track. But what that network, or what this network here could offer, is the possibility for a more reliable trip and potentially free flow conditions for anyone who travels in our region, whether it be traveling to major employment centers during those peak hours, using transit, or for the worker who travels to different parts of our region and our county as part of their daily job. So the map seen here shows what are the potential number of managed lanes that we could implement on each corridor. Again, those major north-south corridors, they're shown here in lime green. I mentioned earlier about the Interstate 5, 805, and 15 having the longest trips, having the most congestion during those peak hours, and we've proposed 4 managed lanes on those corridors. For those urban corridor connections, you'll see that what we proposed in that same lime green color for State Route 78 and Interstate 8 is also a 4-lane managed lane facility. But then on the other urban corridors that are shown here in blue and in purple, we've proposed what you'll see as a mix of 3 lanes that could have a center reversible lane during peak hours when it's most needed, or 2 managed lanes. And all that we've proposed here is matching what the needs of what we observed when we were looking at the data. And so the possibility of this type of a managed lane system was really designed so that people could use it for their entire trip, not just short trips on a single corridor, but it really gives choices to all users of the network, no matter where they live or where they work. And before I leave this slide, I also want to talk about technology and our rural corridors, which are shown in dark green on the eastern part of our county on the map. And the importance of technology on our highway networks, it's not just for the managed lanes. You know, we know that we can utilize technology and how they function, but we also think that it could be used on the rural corridors to improve access and improve safety, as well as how we handle emergency situations. So on those rural corridors, we believe that technology could help us to manage traffic during peak hours of congestion or emergency situations, but that's also coupled with site improvements such as shoulder widenings to allow for safe passing. We also see the role of technology and traffic management for those emergency situations, being able to give travelers real-time travel information and using technology to even reassign lane usage as it's needed to add capacity during certain events or emergency situations. But again, beyond the technology investments in these corridors, we really envision that the rural corridors could have site-specific improvements, such again as those shoulder widenings, realigning curves to improve safety, providing intersection improvements, and other things that really focus again on improving safety, access, and travel reliability for the eastern part of our county. So what you're seeing here is an image that lets you visualize how these improvements could be implemented on a typical highway. The image on the left shows a typical 4-lane highway with a wide shoulder on the right and transit running alongside that shoulder. If we applied some of the improvements of the 5 big moves, the image on the right shows how that we can repurpose those lanes and that shoulder space to accommodate 2 managed lanes, which are highlighted in green, and incorporate enhanced transit services for our existing services that are there or even future services, as you can see in this image. And while you can't see it visually here, again, we do see that technology can help us in improving corridor operations, and it can help us to think about reimagining how highways and corridors can have more capacity added and improve operations and the travel options for people on those corridors without necessarily expanding the physical footprint of that freeway. So in evaluating the opportunities of a complete corridors network, we looked at what capacity offers today with our existing network, with light rail and our freeway that has primarily general purpose lanes. And then we looked at how we could potentially add capacity in the future when you apply the 5 big moves, specifically looking at managed lanes, enhanced transit leap, and technology through the next operating system. So we did some analysis and applied it to all of our corridors, but this is an example shown here of Interstate 5 South. And when we create the complete corridors highways and we advance transit leap, we apply that next operating system, NextOS technology, we have the potential to achieve a considerable capacity increase of 220% on Interstate 5 South to meet future demand on this corridor as demand increases over time. So we did this analysis on all of the corridors, the complete corridors, and we found similar and sometimes more capacity opportunities. But what this analysis and this data is really telling us is that when you apply the 5 big moves, we have an opportunity to truly increase capacity on our existing corridors and meet those future trip demands while also giving people mobility options. So what might this look like in the San Diego region? This here is an image of State Route 78. And again, earlier we grouped this into the urban corridors. It's a typical freeway with 3 lanes in each direction, and there's enough space on both sides of those lanes for an inside and outside shoulder. When we apply the complete corridors concept, we could really reimagine the possibilities of State Route 78 using that same physical footprint. We could potentially add 2 managed lanes on the inside of the corridor, which could give priority access to transit and shared rides. And even as you see in the pavement markings and that Antoinette had mentioned earlier, offering inductive charging for electric vehicles as technology advances. So we could apply technology through the next operating system to provide real-time travel information that has the opportunity to increase safety and reliability, as you can see with the message boards that is conveying traveler information on lane usage and speeds. Again, the advantages of technology could help us in how we manage the lanes in real time, really helping us manage those peak hour conditions and incidents. And as many of us have experienced, incidents and accidents often contribute to some of the worst traffic congestion that we have on our freeways. And here you can see that a real-time message board is able to direct traffic to the left and allow the entry for emergency vehicles. And so these are techniques that we think also could be implemented on the rural corridors to help us improve safety and manage the use of those travel lanes. So I'm now going to turn it over to Alex, who's going to talk with you about the arterials.
So thank you, Terry. Excuse me. So as Terry mentioned, we also examined which local roadways to include in our complete corridors network. So in addition to what we heard from people who want safer spaces to walk and bike, safe intersections, and a better use of our curb space, we examine our regional arterial system that you see here, which is an existing network that was developed in partnership with the local jurisdictions. Now, similar to the data that was done for the highways, we analyzed average trip distances, where in this case, for example, it is less than 5 miles in urban areas. We also looked at vehicle miles travel, where trips on these local arterials can contribute to approximately 30% of the regional VMT. And we also looked at traffic volumes, where these local roadways can carry between 5,000 and 50,000 vehicles on a daily average. Active transportation also played a critical role in establishing a multimodal complete corridor network to create a safe space for people who walk and bike. So as you can see in this map, we later our adopted 2050 regional bike plan as part of our regional complete corridors arterial network. Now, let's just envision what a complete corridors network would look like at the local level. So as you can see here, we have an opportunity to redesign our local streets using existing infrastructure and technology to increase capacity and create a safe space for people to travel on our local roadways, whether they drive, use a shared ride, transit, bike, or walk. But you can see here that technology plays a large role in the complete corridors. So we would be able to manage lanes, prioritize transit, use shared modes, and we would also be able to manage our curb space to improve pickup and drop-offs and urban deliveries. But we would also be able to accommodate for active transportation and other micro mobility modes like electric bikes, scooters, but doing it in a safe and dedicated space. Now, this is what the intersection of Main and Magnolia in the heart of El Cajon looks like today. And we know that there's been a lot of great work done by the city in the downtown area, but building on that great work, let's just take a look at how that intersection could look like with the 5 big moves. So what you see here is this smart intersection concept, which makes a safer environment for vehicles and people who walk and bike. So as technology advances, vehicles, bikes, and other devices will be able to communicate with smart signals. And these smart signals that you see here, for example, can improve signal timing, minimizing stop and go traffic and idling at those intersections. But these smart intersections could also create a safe and more comfortable experience for everyone. And this is particularly important for our disabled and senior populations. And these intersections could also provide priority treatments to emergency vehicles in transit and making transit more reliable and faster. Now, I'd just like to turn it over to Jennifer Williamson, who would go over the development and the opportunities that Transit Leap could offer.
Thanks, Alex, and good morning, everyone. So we've heard from our residents that while transit works for some today, for many, driving remains the only viable option. We've heard that transit is slow, infrequent, doesn't go where people need it to go, and is unsafe. What we'll show you today will hopefully help demonstrate that we can build a comprehensive transit system that will provide a better alternative to our residents. One of the first steps in developing the transit network is determining the types of services that we're planning for. Routes, stations, and supporting infrastructure are then developed around these services. The Transit Leap network includes 5 different types of services. Commuter rail service, that's the vehicle you see in the picture on the slide, would be designed to be separated by cars by operating in tunnels or bridges. Trains could go faster, up to 120 miles per hour, and travel longer distance in shorter amounts of time. Our goal with these services is to provide a trip that's comparable with the automobile. Our second service is one that everybody knows pretty well in this region. Our trolley or sprinter services could be upgraded to provide separation at major intersections to reduce conflict with cars. We'd eliminate unproductive stations that will let our services travel faster and increase operating hours, enabling people to use these services up to 20 hours a day. That was a very important comment that many of our residents told us, is that they need to have these services offered for much longer spans of service. Our third service is the Next Generation Rapid. San Diego got a taste of our first generation of rapid routes in recent years. You might have seen them on I-15, along El Cajon Boulevard, or in the South Bay. We're going to take everything that we've learned to date and make these services better. More priority lanes, better signal priority, and longer spans of service will allow people to use these services when it makes sense for them. Our final 2 services are local buses and flexible fleets. Local bus services are really the workhorses of the transit service. or the transit system. They provide for shorter trips, they're more ingrained in the community, and people use them the most. We will evaluate with our transit operators how to optimize these local transit services. In areas where more on-demand or door-to-door services make sense, we'll look at using flexible fleet services as an alternative. You'll hear more about flexible fleets later in this presentation. So residents told us that they want transit to go where they need it to go and to get them there faster. For most commute trips, people want transit to get them as close to the front door as it can. This is where understanding the data and the trips come in. We're going to take all of that data that Antoinette showed you, and we're going to evaluate how to get people as close to their employment centers as possible. Essentially, we're going to look at where people live and where people work and try to match those trips. Matching these primary employment centers and high commute origins, we're going to look at where some connections might be achieved. The first set of matches that we looked at in providing these connections provided us with over 5,000 trip connections. Well, we know we can't really implement 5,000 trip connections. That's far too many. So we began an iterative process to refine these possible connections through a commuter ranking system that allowed us to determine where those strongest connections could be made. We looked at things like access to mobility hubs, activity centers, and points of interest to determine how a line might be developed. We then undertook a similar process looking at where stations could be sited to maximize our ridership potential. After these connections were identified and possible lines were ranked and re-ranked and the stations located, we then started to define some routes and showed some real distinct routes appearing. The first analysis created 19 possible routes. This included express and local variations of these commuter rail systems. The data was showing us that the north-south routes really did make the most sense for commuter rail, and then also some services from our denser areas of East County. The final step in refining the commuter rail network was to develop what we call propensity. And essentially all we're doing here is we're using data to help us define where the strongest links could be developed. We considered demographic data, socioeconomic data, equity analysis, and good old-fashioned planning principles. These criteria helped us to rank each of these segments to determine which had the highest possible ridership potential. The linkages that are shown in dark purple and pink have the highest scores. The lines that are showed in blue and green had lower scores. But you know, that's not always the end of the story. We also had to look at where we had existing infrastructure. Let's use the I-5, for example. We know that we have a very strong commuter rail line on that corridor, and it's a very big goods movement corridor as well. And we certainly wouldn't abandon that corridor. So we then looked at this through an iterative process. We then began to evaluate where it made the most system and where the strongest lines were developed to form the backbone of the transit system. So here it is. I'm pretty excited about this. This is our Envision Transit Leap Network, and it includes a comprehensive system of commuter rail, light rail, and next generation rapid services. The network will provide, or could provide, fast and frequent services, 10 minutes or better, will be separated from congestion through the use of tunnels and bridges and grade separation at intersections, and in many cases can provide travel times that are comparable to driving. Let's take a look at our commuter rail routes now. The first one, as you see, is a variation on our low sand corridor. This is a north-south line that connects Oceanside to San Ysidro. What you'll see here is that we've taken the line off of the cliffs in Del Mar and taken it to the heart of Sorrento Valley where we know people want to go. We then take it back over to the new Central Mobility Hub, downtown San Diego, and ultimately continue it onwards to the border. Our next line provides a very similar trip But instead of traveling along the coast, we take it through the interior and most urban parts of our county. It'll travel up from the border and then divert into areas of City Heights, North Park, and then connect it to Kearney Mesa and Sorrento Valley before continuing it up the coast. For a lot of people, you would know this line as our purple line. And finally, you'll see an east-west line that comes out of El Cajon. El Cajon through, again, our more urban areas, providing access to Mission Valley, SDSU, over to Central Mobility Hub or downtown San Diego. Now let's layer on our light rail network. As you can see here, this is our existing system, but again, we'd look at grade separating those trolley lines at major intersections, providing longer spans of service and more frequent service, upwards of 10 minutes or better. And finally, our next generation rapid routes. These are shown on purple on the routes. And these again would be provided with more signal priority, more bus lanes, and just better overall longer spans of service. Finally, we have some special services provided here. A future connection to the airport via a people mover that would offer fast and more frequent travel to the airport. And also we've included our high-speed commuter rail, or high-speed rail line that would travel from points north of California into San Diego. And finally, a line that could traverse across Palomar Airport Road, providing connections from East County over to the northern or the western side of the region. So let's imagine what it could look like. What you see here is San Ysidro Intermodal Transit Center. It doesn't look very friendly now, does it? And here's what a reimagined San Ysidro could look like with expanded mobility options, vibrant amenities for people coming, going, and waiting. The Transit Leap services and a range of flexible fleets will make it easier for people to come and go. Here's another image of the existing trolley platform, and it's constrained in size, but also it really does lack amenities. So envision what this could look like if we were to provide a commuter rail service adjacent to the trolley and higher density land uses surrounding the station. So finally, once the transit network was developed and we felt confident in that network, we wanted to evaluate how it performed when compared to the transit system of today. It's important to note that our Transit Leap network is designed to provide a trip every 10 minutes. So today, only 5% of people are within 10 minutes of fast and frequent transit service. With the Transit Leap network in place, this number rises to 55%. As I mentioned before, we heard that people want longer service hours. Today, only 8% of the population has access to these longer service hours. In fact, just a handful of trolley and bus services operate this span of service. With the implementation of Transit Leap network, if we were to implement it, this could be increased to 60%. Finally, we evaluated the access our communities of concern could have to this network. Today, only 7% of low-income residents have access to transit that operates every 10 minutes or better. With the implementation of the Transit Leap service network, this could increase to 59%. By applying the Transit Leap as part of the 5 big moves, our transit system can become faster, fairer, and cleaner. And with that, I'd like to turn it back over to Colleen.
Thank you. And that completes part 1 of today's agenda. So I'll turn it back to the chair. Chair Desmond, if you would like to entertain a 10-minute break for the committee members.
Sure. 10 minutes is 10:10, so let's be back at 10:20 for the rest of the presentation. Thanks. All right, I hope everyone enjoyed their short break. We're going to continue on with the presentation. Colleen, do you want to take us to the next portion?
Chair
Yes.
Desmond, we need to ensure that we have a quorum before we get started.
Well, on a discussion item, okay. You have a quorum.
Yes, we have a quorum for all three committees.
All right, thank you. All right, Colleen.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chair Desmond. We will now begin with part 2 of today's agenda with Mobility Hub. So Marissa, take it away.
Thanks, Colleen, and good morning, everyone. I'm going to walk you through how we used data and valuable input from residents to develop a regional network of mobility hubs, or MoHubs as I like to call them. Antoinette gave you a nice overview of mobility hubs earlier, but I'd like to reiterate that anytime we talk about a mobility hub, we're not just talking about co-locating a handful of services at a single transit station. We're thinking much bigger about how a lot of travel options, safe streets, and supporting technology can be spread across communities to make getting around a lot easier. A whole community comprises a mobility hub. Essentially, mobility hubs do two things: help people get to and from Transit Leap, and make it easier than ever to make short trips around a community without needing to rely on a personal car. People need to feel safe while waiting for transit or riding a bike, and all of our proposed mobility hubs would help address this by creating spaces where people feel both comfortable and respected as they travel from one part of the region to another. Mobility hubs and Transit Leap are intrinsically linked. So we collaborated to examine the more than 60 major commute starts and ends to assess where mobility hubs could be situated. But commute trips only tell part of the story. So we also used Teralytics, a third-party data source, to evaluate top non-commute destinations in the region for added insight. Bottom line is, mobility hubs work best when you have a high concentration of people, destinations, and travel choices. They're also essential to ensuring a high quality of life for people of all ages, abilities, and backgrounds. These guiding principles informed our analysis to determine ideal locations for mobility hubs. We looked to see which areas were most conducive to hubs based on things like current and forecasted population and jobs, proximity to major destinations like hospitals, beaches, colleges, major shopping centers, and more. Looked at the presence of senior, low-income, and minority communities, and we assessed walkability and levels of short trip making. The results of this propensity analysis, shown in the map on the right, is displayed, where green and yellow areas reflect high to moderate levels of hub propensity, while gray reflects areas of very low levels of propensity. The process helped us to quote unquote right size all mobility hub areas based on characteristics that lend themselves nicely to mobility hub investment. It's also vital to ensure we have a connected network of mobility hubs to help people reach major destinations and attractions, including the airport. The proposed mobility hub network displayed here does this and more. The network could be comprised of our region's urban core, plus 30 more mobility hubs, all co-located with Transit Leap to serve a large amount of employment and recreational destinations. Urban core would span downtown San Diego and surrounding higher density residential and commercial areas, everything from Mid-City to Barrio Logan to Midway community. 4 gateway hubs would be key entry points into the 5 Big Moves network: Escondido, El Cajon, Oceanside, and the US-Mexico border, and 9 major employment centers not already captured by our urban core or gateways could offer mixed-use development opportunities. 8 coastal hubs that are popular seaside destinations for residents and visitors alike are also included. And last, but certainly not least, 9 suburban, mostly residential neighborhoods that are situated near Transit Leap routes. It's within this mobility hub network you could see the highest concentration of Transit Leap and flexible fleet services, everything from next-gen rapid to e-bikes that use complete corridors to travel within and between hubs. I like to call this hub-to-hub travel hub hopping. By 2050, we'd anticipate that these hubs would cover approximately half of the region's residents and more than 2/3 of the region's jobs, making them great opportunities to boost the live, work, play lifestyle. And with nearly half of our trips in our region being 3 miles or less, these hubs offer a unique opportunity to truly transform how we move around our communities using pedal bikes, electric trikes, mopeds, and more. It's also really important to gauge how well these proposed hubs overlap with our communities of concern. These maps show how we anticipate hub coverage to look in 2050. The map on the left shows we anticipate that the hubs would cover approximately 60% of all low-income households by 2050. The map in the middle displays that more than half of all minority residents could be living in a hub by 2050. And the third map shows how half of all seniors, 75 and older, could be living in a mobility hub by 2050 as well. Now let's get to the fun part and take a closer look at two potential mobility hubs. On the far west end of the urban core, a proposed central mobility hub could be a key convergence point where all types of transit services from across the region come together to provide connections. The days of I-5 dividing my uptown community from Midway would be a thing of the past, because there'd be a lot of different ways for me to access the central mobility hub and the communities surrounding. A central mobility hub could be a place to connect to get to work, make that air travel connection, or be a place to have a fun night out. A new people mover could also connect the hub to the airport with fast and frequent service. Take just a moment to imagine what it could be like having our own Grand Central-like experience. Chic architectural design, a variety of shopping and dining options, preferably featuring some local businesses, and just a place to meet up with family and friends, all while maintaining physical distance if that's still needed. People could make their way to other places. There'd be plenty of dedicated curb space for passenger loading, separated bikeways for scooter and bike riding, and comfortable spots to wait for family and friends or for your next pooled ride. In the lower levels of the Central Mobility Hub, you'd have access to high-speed connections with commuter rail, light rail, and access to the automated people mover to the airport. There could be clear and intuitive wayfinding to make navigating the hub a breeze, real-time travel information reminiscent of world-class airports ensures everyone would be on time to catch their train, maybe even making time to catch an iced latte on the way. Interactive travel kiosks and Wi-Fi would be spread throughout the mobility hub, ensuring everyone is connected at all times. And if you're like me and your phone is always dying, that's going to come in real handy. Next, we're going to head on up to Oceanside, my favorite beach city in the region. Great restaurant, wine, and coffee scene aside, Oceanside has long served as a welcome point for anyone traveling south from LA. So let's get a taste for how Oceanside Transit Center and the surrounding community can be transformed into a fully functioning gateway mobility hub. Improvements could offer a new type of waiting experience at OTC, offering complimentary Wi-Fi, mobile device charging, public art, dedicated bike share corrals could keep the platform clutter-free. Parcel delivery lockers could make it convenient to pick up a package or drop one off on your way to and from the train. And mobile retailers could stage on site to sell snacks and other services. At the South Tremont entrance, the station's already equipped with wide lanes and plentiful curb space. We could integrate mobility hub features like on-demand electric shuttles. Some of them could be headed towards Camp Pendleton. Convenient parking information, space reservation information to help make station arrival a breeze. Moving east to Mission Avenue at Nevada, shared mobility services and amenities could expand far beyond the transit center to bring this gateway mobility hub to life while building upon the traffic calming measures the city of Oceanside's already implemented on Mission Avenue. We actually worked closely with the city to develop this rendering of Mission Avenue at Nevada, depicting a mix of autonomous shuttles, a shared fleet of mopeds, electric vehicle charging, and mixed use development. They could all work together to complete this vital mobility hub in North County. And visitors coming from other parts of the region could feel at home knowing it's so easy to get around. With these mobility hub features in mind, I'll pass it over to Crystal, who will share more about flexible fleets.
Thank you, Marissa, and good morning, everyone. I am really happy to be here today to share our flexible fleet strategy, a strategy that envisions providing shared, electric, on-demand services that provide more choices for moving around the region. See, the beauty of flexible fleets is that they allow people to try new, fun, and affordable ways of traveling. And because they're enabled by technology, it means that they can easily adapt to new environments and changing conditions. As part of our regional vision, the Flexible fleet strategy could strengthen the Transit Leap network by providing connections to transit and mobility hubs. For those that don't have access to, don't want to own a car, or can't afford to own a car, shared services could be available on demand, ready to take them where they need to go. And while we know that people have commitments throughout the day that make it difficult to try transit today, like going to the grocery store after work or picking up kids from school, flexible fleets allow you to imagine how you might travel, how you might move around without relying on a car. Many flexible fleet services exist today, several of which are actually already operating in our region. We conducted extensive case study research to help us group and categorize services with similar features and identified 5 flexible fleet service types. The first is micromobility, which includes low speed, low occupancy devices like bikes and scooters that are generally best suited for short trips, although electric bikes allow you to go much further without breaking a sweat. Ride hail, like Uber and Lyft, allows you to request a ride from a driver in real time. Or if you prefer to drive yourself, CarShare allows you to book a vehicle as a short-term rental. Rideshare provides shared trips for people headed in the same direction, like carpool, vanpool, and pooled ride-hailing. And microtransit provides on-demand shuttles for those longer shared trips from door to door. In recent years, and in particular due to COVID-19 in the past few months, we've seen a huge shift to online retail and online shopping. Last mile delivery uses new approaches like e-bikes, drones, and delivery bots to help make those efficient deliveries to our homes and smart lockers while reducing freight congestion on local roads. Now, the services I just walked through may not have sounded new to some of you. In fact, we heard that many people are already aware of a lot of these services, but they just can't imagine how they might use something like micromobility or ride hailing, for example, for something beyond social or recreational purposes. Our research helped us to understand where and how these services would work best and provided insight into how we might design services so that they're serving all types of trips, not just the fun ones. The majority of flexible fleets are operated in partnership with the private sector. So to augment our case study research, we conducted interviews with a lot of flexible fleet companies, including microtransit providers, ride-hailing, autonomous vehicle companies, and ride-sharing. And the feedback we received was really great and helpful to our process. Key takeaways included the importance of having supportive infrastructure like curbs, electric vehicle chargers, dedicated lanes, to ensure that services are operating safely, accessibly, and efficiently. And that's something we also heard from community members, as Antoinette mentioned earlier in the presentation. People who are interested in using bikes or scooters, but want safer, separated lanes, and people with disabilities who might want to try ride sharing, but need to ensure that they have a safe pickup and drop-off area to safely board the vehicle. Companies were also largely supportive of incentives and policies that encourage ride sharing and ensures that services are operating equitably in our disadvantaged communities. And I'd say in general, a lot of these companies are excited. They're eager for opportunities to be part of the mobility ecosystem and hope to form partnerships with public agencies to complement investments in transit. These types of collaborative partnerships not only ensures that we're proactively planning for what's on the ground now, but helps us maintain an eye for the future, as we know technology is going to continue to evolve. But we can't talk partnerships without also having the community at the table. Residents and our network of community-based organizations acknowledge the importance of taking a bottoms-up approach to designing and deploying services. This ensures that services are truly responding to a community's needs and catering to our diverse population. This means designing services that provide affordable options for low-income families, provides accessible vehicles for seniors and people with disabilities, and creates choices for people who don't own smartphones or credit cards to also easily access these services. Now, because of the diversity in flexible fleets, the number of services that are available, and the types of vehicles, it means that flexible fleets could really operate everywhere. In our Mobility Hub network, you'd likely find a wide variety of flexible fleets, providing those connections to transit and serving short trips within the hubs. But outside of our Mobility Hub network, flexible fleets play an equally important role by providing an alternative travel choice for people. Services like rideshare and microtransit could thrive in suburban and rural environments. In fact, Vanpool is an example of a service that has long provided a reliable transportation option in less urban areas. Drones could make deliveries in our rural homes, while reducing the number of large delivery trucks on backcountry roads. And microtransit could be a viable option in rural villages and tribal areas by transitioning underutilized local buses to smaller on-demand fleets. So let's take a look at one of these microtransit fleets could look like in the future. Smaller, right-sized vehicles like this one on the screen could evolve to be connected and driverless. Concerns we've heard related to sharing a ride, like privacy, the need for ensuring safety and storage while traveling, could be addressed by many of the amenities you see here. That includes space for personal belongings, room for car seats, privacy screens, and even an onboard ambassador to ensure that safety and privacy are always maintained while sharing the ride. And in light of today's pandemic, amenities like a cleaning robot and disinfectant supplies will be an important component in future rideshare vehicles to ensure that riders feel safe. So let's hop on over now to North Park to see how these services could operate. Among being a great place where you can find really great local coffee shops and restaurants, North Park is actually also a primary origin, meaning that there's a lot of people that live here that travel to our region's major employment centers, myself included. Now imagine North Park's El Cajon Boulevard transformed into a complete corridor, connecting all of the communities around Balboa Park. People could use an on-demand shuttle or dedicated bike lanes to visit your neighborhood's newest brewery or catch a late night concert at the observatory. Sidewalk delivery bots like the blue one on the screen could deliver packages to people waiting at the transit station. And for our commuters headed into Sereno Valley, well, they could hop on a shuttle and catch the commuter rail for a quick ride into work. Now remember, Sereno Valley is the region's largest employment center with over 129,000 employees traveling here on a daily basis. Before COVID-19, that meant that just about half of the vehicles on I-5 during the morning commute were headed and destined to this job center. For those that ride coaster into this job center today, they lack connections that take them the extra 3 to 5 miles from the transit station to their desk. With our regional vision, commuters otherwise stuck in traffic today would now have a new option with high-speed commuter rail. This would free up space on the highways for other drivers and freight vehicles. Small and large flexible fleets could be available to take employees, students, and visitors and provide them with direct access to all of the opportunities that Sereno Valley has to offer. Zooming into the heart of Sereno Valley, we find ourselves now on Mira Mesa Boulevard, a really important road that connects this job center to adjacent communities in Mira Mesa and beyond. Now, our vision could revitalize this employment center. High-speed options could provide and attract mixed-use development and truly transform this job center into a multimodal community. Microtransit shuttles could pick up people at the transit station and drop them off at their employer's front door. Employees could even subsidize flexible fleets to ensure employees have priority access to these services. Fleets and next-gen rapid services would have dedicated access to the curb, avoiding conflict with bikers or other micromobility riders. And for visitors traveling to our region on business, well, they could use car share or an on-demand rideshare service to sightsee the region after work or for any of those midday trips when traveling, all before hopping on the commuter rail back to the proposed Central Mobility Hub to catch their flight out of San Diego International Airport. Next, Antoinette is going to share how technology and the next operating system will seamlessly integrate all of these services into our transportation system.
Thank you, Crystal. So the last of the 5 big moves is the technology that makes the transportation system operate smoothly, and we call it the Next Operating System or the Next OS. So the Next OS is a secure digital platform that takes in data from a variety of public and private transportation sources and then uses that data to manage the transportation system and to deliver new applications and tools for people traveling around the region, for transportation operators, and for planners and policymakers. So for people traveling around the region, the Next OS offers tools for trip planning via smartphone applications or kiosks for people who don't have a smartphone, where you can plan and book and pay for a trip across any mode seamlessly. Transportation service operators like transit agencies or freight operators will have real-time insights into how their fleets are operating and the ability to optimize their services in near real time. They'll also have the ability to provide their customers with better, more accurate and reliable information. And planners and policymakers like all of us will have access to data and visualization tools that inform important decision making. Instead of looking at historic data sets that are static, we'll have real-time information that's available at our fingertips. So now let's take a look at how the NextOS combined with all of the other moves can improve the experience for a typical commuter. So please meet Laura. Laura is a resident of Southeast San Diego. She lives there with her family. She's a medical assistant at Sharp in Sereno Valley. And Laura and her husband share a car currently. Laura's husband often needs the car for his job. So today, Laura doesn't have very many viable commute options. Because she works as a medical assistant, her schedule can vary. She sometimes works late at night or in the early hours of the morning when there isn't transit available currently. If she takes the car, her husband doesn't have a way to drop off the kids at school and get to his own job. But even when Laura works regular hours and can take transit, the amount of time it would take her to get to work is triple the amount of time it takes to drive. But as we all know, traffic coming in and out of Sereno Valley can be pretty bad. So her drive time is even unpredictable because there aren't currently express lanes that offer her a faster trip. In the future, though, the NextOS and the 5 big moves could offer Laura more choices and better information that would make her life much easier. She could hail a pooled ride and travel in the express lanes for free. She could take fast transit to work, or Laura could drive and she could pay to use the express lanes for a reliable trip. But Laura chooses transit because it's available when she needs to get to and from work. It's as fast as driving, and it's free because her transit pass is subsidized by her employer, Sharp. That allows her husband to use the car to get to his job. And her son can now ride his bike to school because there's safe, complete corridor infrastructure in her neighborhood, and Laura gets a notification on her app when her son arrives at school. She can take her daughter on the train and drop her off at the daycare in the mobility hub adjacent to where she works. And she even has Wi-Fi on the train now, so she can order groceries from her smartphone to be delivered to the mobility hub locker and grab on the way home from work. This is the kind of experience that we want for everyone to have in the future. Transportation choices that make your life easier, that are affordable, that are easy to access, and that get you where you need to go without any delays. So with that, I'm going to hand the presentation back to Colleen. She's going to share with you a new online tool that we've developed so that you and your communities can use it to explore all of the projects in the vision, and you can view more user journeys like Laura's. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Antoinette, and thank you to the team for really detailed presentations on what is envisioned. We have even more detail, and we have the 5 big moves data viewer, and we know that many of you are interested in digging more into the details. So here's an example I'm going to share with you. You can click on the left side of this bar and choose mobility hubs and high-speed transit in this example. Here we've also clicked on the Escondido Mobility Hub, and it shows all the features that are envisioned at that location. So that's for you, Miramac-Namera. The next example, complete corridors. So looking here at the SR52 corridor and looking a little bit further into the features of improvements there. And then the final example is on Transit Leap, and this is clicking on the purple line, and here we get to see what the features are in terms of where the stops are and frequency of service. So we invite you all to take a look at this, where you can get more detail on what's envisioned. So this wraps up our presentation on a bold new vision for the San Diego region, a fully connected system of managed lanes, improvements on our rural corridors to address safety and access, a state-of-the-art commuter rail system supported by light rail, next generation rapid, mobility hubs, the great places in all of our communities that would have multiple transportation options, supported by flexible fleets and the next operating system. And where we started last April with you, or April of 2019, we talked about fully connecting people in our communities, and that figure 8 connection comes through here. The connection of transit, and managed lanes. This vision aims to tackle the legislative mandates, congestion in our region, and social equity. We know with all of this, cost is an important consideration, and we have looked at what this could cost. And our estimate right now is about $177 billion investment over 30 years. By comparison, the currently board adopted plan is $128 billion investment. There's a lot more to come on details on how the vision sets the stage for the plan, how we would pay for a plan, and those will all be decisions that the SANDAG Board of Directors will weigh in on and be the ultimate deciders. So I'm pleased to wrap up the presentation today with an inspiring video, and then we will wrap up for your discussion and public input. Thank you.
Transportation isn't just about getting us from point A to point B. It's about connecting us to each other, to our environment, to our communities, connecting us to everything and everyone we love. But congestion and the absence of alternatives are breaking these connections, creating a divide between where we are and where we want to be. We are losing time. We now have the opportunity to think differently about how we connect, a chance to truly innovate. Across our region, SANDAG's bold transportation vision can accommodate the diverse demands of the entire county, as well as the unique needs of individual communities. At the border, people can be welcomed by a variety of choices to quickly get them where they want to go. Roadways can be reimagined to balance space between cars and other ways of travel, and shift based on demand. Our neighbors can enjoy new choices for getting to school, to the store, and back home. Businesses can move goods more efficiently, while employees can enjoy smart alternatives to the daily commute. From the edges to its center, our region can be more connected. Through thoughtful planning and careful execution, we can deliver a world-class transportation system that protects our environment and strengthens our communities. The regional plan may be counted in dollars or miles, but its success will be measured in time. Our biggest plans will be repaid in the smallest moments.
All right, thank you, Colleen. Instead of the 10-minute break, I'm going to kind of press on here because we've got probably a lot of speakers on this, and if that's okay with the board and the other chairs, if we just press on and go first with member comments. If you'd like to make a comment as far as any members, if you want to turn your videos on, then we can call on you, or I can call on you, and we can get member comments first, and then we'll go to the public comments. No members?
Can you hear me? This is Dwight Worden in Delmar. First, my compliments. This is really wonderful work. It does me proud to be associated with such talented people. I do have a couple of questions that I'd like a response to. One is you identified the school transportation problem as a situation, but I don't really see how that integrates into what you've presented. At least for young kids, it seems unlikely parents are going to want to have their kids navigate hubs and last and first mile questions. And so that's my question number one. And the question number two is, what can we in local government and the community expect next? How is this going to roll out between here and the finish line in 2021? And I will mute myself back, and thanks again.
I don't know, did you want to brief answer? Go ahead, Kelly.
Thank you. So excellent question. And you're right, in the presentation, we focused a lot on the commute trips. The school age children trips, those really come in at the with the local roadway improvements, and the flexible fleets can also help tackle that challenge. So that's an important part for us to be thinking about in the vision, is how our kids get around. And that's why the transportation system needs to be safe and convenient.
All right, Mayor Solis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Wow, I am thoroughly impressed with all of the details regarding the presentation. It was great to see the interconnectivity from the border all the way to our colleagues in the east, to the north. It was a great presentation. Today I'm wearing my MTS Vice Chair hat, and I just wanted to share that as the MTS representative, we know that MTS carried about 30,000 people a day pre-COVID. And it's great to know that both Hassan and Director Ekrada and Director or Executive Director Cooney have both been in contact and constant conversation about how to work together. And we know that MTS is definitely one of the most efficient and effective systems in the nation. And before COVID-19, again, MTS conducted extensive outreach to explore a half-cent sales tax to improve that transit. And people told us they valued, the system and wanted more buses, wanted more trolleys and more rapids. And we know that every so often our MTS conducts customer service surveys to really see what the heartbeat is of our ridership. So it's great to see that both agencies really see that as a priority. And in many of those rider satisfaction surveys, it's been or exceeded 90%. So as we go into, really recognizing that MTS and SANDAG are those partners, are those collaborators, we really want to make sure that, that many years before, a lot of the investment was in the freeways. So we're really excited, and we support the investment in transit. We support the investment in multimodal corridors and complete corridors for that matter. And to that end, we support 100% the efforts that increase investment in transit throughout our region. And so on behalf of MTS, we wanna thank the entire squad there at SANDAG for all of their work. We know this is, I don't want to say the beginning, because we started the conversation many moons ago, but this is one way with which my children and their children can envision what the future will be. And I hope that us as elected officials can see ourselves really planting the seed for the future of what San Diego's region can be, and think big, think bold. Yes, it's a big price tag. And I think to the question of first and last mile, I know in our South Bay region, many families are connected first and last mile to mass transit. So for us in the South Bay, it's definitely something in conjunction with the school district buses. And secondly, my question is with regards to the price tag. What is the comparison between this year's, this comparison to maybe last year's or in years past? So how are we in that comparison? Thank you again, Mr. Chair. I will yield back my time.
Okay. Colleen, do you have any answer? I guess you already mentioned that it was 128 billion was the, is that what I heard? Was for what? Is that for the current RTP?
The current board adopted regional plan, RTP, is a $128 billion investment. And what we envision with this vision is a $177 billion investment. I think it's really important to clarify that one's a vision and one's a plan. And some of the next steps that Councilmember Warden asked about will be to come back to you with the using the vision as a strategy to develop the plan. So you'll have opportunities to weigh in on that.
And is that 177, just real quick, is that in this year dollars or is that in construction year dollars?
Thank you. Excellent question. Both those estimates are in 2020 dollars.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mayor Jones.
Thank you. You actually asked one of the questions that I had. I have not seen, maybe I missed it, the modeling to prove that we are going to meet our greenhouse gas emissions mandates with this plan. And then there were no details on the speed and timing of our rail system. So I'm wondering how that also translates to meeting our mandates. And then also there was discussion that it met our mandate. I heard a little bit later in the presentation that it aims to meet our mandate. So if I could get clarification on that, that would be great. I think maybe that's a question.
Thank you, Mayor Jones. So we are now embarking on the modeling. We put everything in place in this vision that's multimodal, encouraging the land use and transportation connections with the goal of meeting the mandates. Again, that's the difference between the vision, and then we'll refine the vision working with all of you into the plan. Our job is to provide a plan or deliver a plan to the board of directors that meets the mandates. So that work is underway now, and we'll be sharing the results of the modeling as soon as it's available. You broke up a little bit for me on the detail on some part of the system. I think it was something about transit, but I couldn't get what you said.
Yeah, on the speed of the rail lines that we're discussing, the high-speed rail lines, like I'm just kind of curious how that fits into meeting or aiming for the mandates. And then I do have a follow-up question actually, now that you were saying the 177 billion. I would like to figure out how we are going to figure out how much that will cost a taxpayer in the county, how that translates to that. And then also if it's a vision and not an actual plan, because we still have to do the modeling, I would assume that it would need many tweaks. And so I don't think that 177 billion could be accurate, but I could be wrong on that. So maybe if we could also dive into that and explain that better.
Okay, so first of all, the speed of transit and how that fits into meeting our mandates, if I understand that question correctly.
Yes.
Speed is convenience. So when you look today at what the transit options are, it takes people twice, 3 times, 4 times as long to get to a destination using transit than if you were to drive. So in order to have something that's convenient, where we're taking multiple people that are going from similar locations to similar locations, and if it's fast and convenient, you're then reducing the number of vehicle miles traveled reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and that's how that helps to meet state mandates. Your question about how the vision translates into a plan, that's what we want to work with you on this fall. And you're right, there will be some tweaking, and as we do the modeling, that will help us refine the vision, using the vision as a strategy to develop your plan.
And then the follow-up question, cost per taxpayer, the 177 billion, how much will that be taxpayer in the county, and how will we achieve that? Because, you know, I always look at, okay, first of all, how much is something going to cost? Can I afford it? That's always part of what I am always making every decision that I make in the city. And then, you know, also personally too. So I want to figure out what that dollar amount is for each taxpayer in the county, and how do we see that happening.
Okay. If I may, Chairman.
You're putting us on for some reason.
If I may, Chair Desmond, to respond to Mayor Jones' couple of items. I think, Mayor Jones, you're right on regarding we do not have yet the modeling that say whether we are meeting or exceeding or falling below the greenhouse gas emission goal. We believe, given the analysis we've done so far, that the vision will meet and exceed, but that's not something we can prove because we haven't done the modeling yet, and we will be doing that as the next step. As to the cost and how we're going to pay for it, I think that's something for the board to debate. When you said it's going to cost the taxpayer is already paying toward gas taxes at the federal and state level, which will get portion of that. I think our estimate is we will get $2.44 in the last estimate we had historically for every dollar that we spend locally. So this will be a combination of federal, state, and local funding that the board have to discuss and the board have to take action on. Right now, this region have no choice but to put a plan that meets the requirement. And that plan has to be financially constrained, meaning that we have to assume in the plan reasonably available funding between now and 2050.
All right. Councilmember Moreno. You're muted.
Thank you. Sorry about that. First and foremost, thank you for the presentation. It's very exciting to learn the 2021 regional plan. And obviously it's 5 big moves. It's exciting to hear that we're moving forward and this is starting to take shape. Although the regional plan being discussed today encompasses all of San Diego region, or county, I should say, I'd like to highlight the importance of our border region and the impact it has on transportation and commuters. Can staff please bring up slide 32? Is that possible? And so one of the things I wanted to highlight in slide 32 is you can see the extent of our border impact reaches far beyond just the South Bay. We currently have 3 land ports of entry in my district, in District 8. And the San Ysidro Port of Entry, there were over 36.7 million crossings in 2019 and 14.9 million crossings through the Otay Mesa Port of Entry. That is 51.6 million people crossing through these 2 ports of entry in 2019. And just to give you guys the numbers, that's over 141,000 individuals crossing in San Diego per day. These numbers, I think, highlight the need for better transportation options at our border. I think that's why I believe it's very critical for the the intermodal transportation center in San Isidro as a priority mobility hub, which would complement the proposed central mobility hub. The San Isidro ITC, as we call it, would provide multiple transportation options for our binational community. The border region also includes the community of Otay Mesa, which is one of the last prime industrial lands in the city of San Diego. The area is going to see exponential growth, and it's going to become a major employment hub in the future. And I think we have a really good opportunity to think of transportation for the future of this area, of this land, as this land continues to develop. And as we talk about the future of transportation in the region, we must take into account the positive impacts that the border has in our region. And we should also acknowledge the fact that the pandemic has changed the way we see the world. Some communities have been affected disproportionately, and we must, address these inequities. And I think change, it must be made by the way Sandag operates and by the way Sandag plans its transportation. And I think this does start with the 5 big moves, which will be, I think, a game changer for transportation equity in our whole state. So I'm very pleased to see the presentation today, and I'm honored to be just a little part of what we're doing here in the San Diego region. So thank you to the staff. Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Moreno. Mr. Sankey, and I just kind of want to remind everybody, we're going to have this presentation at the board again next Friday, and it might be some changes to it. So we've got some public speakers, so if we could, I'm just trying to keep the meeting moving along if we can. So Mr. Sankey.
Do you guys hear me?
Yes.
Outstanding. Chair, thank you. And Councilmember Moreno, thank you for bringing up the border region. I'm going to start with my comments related to my service on the border working border commission at Sandag. The connections to CBX and also to the upcoming Otay 2 are highlighted in the slides. They're a big part of the planning process, and it's a really, really critical part, as Vivian reminded us all. The second part, I participated in the tribal transportation meeting back last year, and I know a lot of that rural planning that folks have been doing involved areas near the tribal lands, and I think the participation of the tribal folks along the way as we put this vision into action is going to be really, really important, and their participation will be critical to the success of the rural parts of this project. I was kind of disappointed to see in the employment slides the absence of the military bases, particularly those in Coronado, identified as employment centers. I think more integral planning. Obviously, they found a way to count the jobs for arena planning. Maybe for transportation planning, we could do a better job of linking those two things together. And I know that Antoinette in her remarks talked about the military and opportunities to improve that transportation, but I think a clearer connection between military jobs and civilian jobs in terms of planning where people live, where people work will make a big, big difference. As a South County rep on the transportation committee, I know that South County experiences a tremendous amount of traffic related to the military, since many of them live in the South County, whether it's the Otay or the Chula Vista area. And so that transportation links in that area to those military bases, whether it's 32nd Street, the new SEAL base, or the 2 bases in Coronado, are critical. And for my North County friends, I know Pendleton has a significant traffic impact up there as well. So a better connection between military and civilian jobs as we plan this will produce a better system. I don't necessarily need to have that answered as a question, though. I think the equity was tremendously effectively presented in this. And frankly, whoever did the graphics did a super job. San Diego historically has not done big things well. Just ask a Charger fan, or ask somebody who helped put the Midway downtown. We are not good at big things. And Hassan, I have to tell you, what you guys have shown us here is a really big thing. And San Diego is going to have to get out of its own way to make this thing work, and I bet we can. So, Hassan, salute to your team. The presentation today was fabulous. It creates an excitement, hopefully, for those of us on the policy side, as well as in the communities, I think building on the work that the MTS folks did in terms of their ballot measure is a great place to start when it comes to how to get people excited about transit. And I also think that your team has put together something that, as Rebecca pointed out, Mayor Jones pointed out, is a big lift, but one that hopefully San Diego can get behind in a broad sense. And so Hassan, salute you for some really big thinking. I hope San Diego can get on the train with you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Sankey. I see we have a few more speakers for the board, and I'm just gonna, as I see them on the screen here, I'm still gonna go with Councilmember Alicio, Deputy Mayor Jack Feller, and then I see Gary Bonelli. So I'm gonna get in that order, and then as more pop up, we'll get to them. So just give you a heads up. All right, Councilmember Alicio.
Yes, first of all, thank you to staff for the tremendous presentation. It is a vision. The two things, their comments, only comments, they've been my comments since day one of going through this back when I was on the board, is please keep in mind environmental effects on wildlife. Wildlife migration corridors as you're thinking about high-speed rail. And I know we have to go through environmental approval for that, but I always feel like somehow that's sort of thing gets lost in the conversation. The other comment I have is to keep in mind that if we are operating under a state where increased transit leads to by right development and we're running it into more rural areas, we need to have some way to prevent sprawl. And those are my two comments. My third comment is when you're looking at all the local improvements, and I love the shot of El Cajon, which recognized that apparently even in 2050, they'll still be driving pickups, but who is going to pay for those? The local jurisdictions often are paying, out of their own pocket, so to speak, for things that we put upon them. And those are just my comments going down the road, but kudos to staff, to Hassan, to everyone for really presenting a clean, understandable, multifaceted presentation. And I look forward to seeing what comes from it.
All right, thank you. Deputy Mayor Feller, please.
Thank you. I have a question in regards to, I think it was slide 52, but it showed the bike lanes, but no walking area, and except right adjacent to the traffic. I didn't see that that they can walk everywhere. It's a little clear right now, but I just wonder if bike riders are going to share with walkers on any of these bike paths, such as we have up here, that go along the rail trail and out on our river trail. The other question I have is OTC is undergoing through our Oceanside Transit Center is undergoing a pretty good sized renovation we're going to hear about soon. Should we also be prepared for undergrounding? One of the scenes showed the trains underground at one of the hubs, so it didn't look like it was the main hub. We're down by the airport. So those are just my questions, and so maybe next time they can answer that. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Mr. Feller. Mr. Bonelli.
Thank you, County Supervisor Desmond. Thank you, staff, for the presentation, a comment, and then a question. The comment is, for the last 2.5 years, your military working group has been working with the local communities, their planners, city managers, and the bases around the region to come up with mobility options. And hopefully that 2.5 years of work will be integrated into this vision. My question is, from a port perspective, the East-West Railway, what is now the San Diego, Arizona Eastern Railway, does the vision contain a railway east-west, mostly for product, for goods movement.
Thank you, Mr. Benelli. And yes, just first of all, on the work of the military working group, and all of that work has been fully integrated into the vision. And then I'm going to ask Jennifer Williamson if you can respond to Commissioner Benelli's question about the east-west connection and goods movement from the port east.
Yes, thank you for that question. So we looked at the east-west rail line associated with passenger rail travel. So as you saw on our slide, we did incorporate a new commuter rail route that would travel from El Cajon to downtown San Diego. Our vision did not look at or evaluate the goods movement rail line, though, that travels from east to west. But we did look at evaluating how we could include goods movement as part of our passenger rail network. So there is opportunities there.
Thank you.
Let's see, Councilmember Montgomery. I don't see any other pictures up there, so turn your camera on if you want to speak, but Councilmember Montgomery, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just want to take the time to thank staff for this presentation, for keeping my office in the loop as well. It does make me think about the students in my district, and all of our high schools have partnered with UCSD, that this will just help connect them to education and help them thrive. And so I'm appreciative of that. I think also the mobility hubs and will help our seniors that are extremely active. I do see this as an investment. You know, we know who our choice riders are. We also know who are folks that have to, you know, choose that have to ride transit, and making an investment into them, into our region in this way is very, very encouraging. So in full support, and just wanted to say thank you. We'll have more questions as we move forward, but the data that you used so far to begin us in unveiling this wonderful vision is really a pleasure and honor to be a part of this. So I just want to say thank you.
All right, thank you. I see Mayor Edson. Do you want to speak? I don't see your camera on now.
Sorry, my camera is not, my performance has been reduced. It says closing Zoom may help my Mac cool down. So it seems to have shut down my video. But I do have some questions regarding the mobility hub that's shown in the Solana Beach Del Mar area, and also the vision for the train station that we have in Solana Beach going forward.
And Ms. Edson, did you have a particular comment about that, or do you want to have what detail are you requesting?
I do not, my comment is just that I'd like, and I put something in the chat that I would like to do a deeper dive on that stuff, and I look forward to looking at the other
data viewer. Yes, we'll be happy to work with you on that.
Okay, thank you. And also to thank staff for an excellent presentation, lots of work, and very interesting. Thank you.
Okay, I have a question and a couple of comments. The first question, the 177 for the 177 billion for the cost of this endeavor. How much is that in construction year dollars? Is it twice that amount, 3 times that amount? Is it, you got any idea of when this actually goes to construction, what the cost would be?
We do not. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, we want to work with you all on how projects would be phased in. And then that phasing, then we would look at the inflation rate based upon when certain projects would happen. And that's how we would come up with that estimate. So that work is yet to be done.
I hear Hassan has echoed in.
Yeah, sorry, Chairman.
Sorry, I just say.
Oh, you're unmuted.
Okay. Just say that one of the reasons we use the 2020 dollars is it's really hard to use expenditure years dollars because, you know, cost of construction could go up, projects could be delayed. So we could estimate expenditure years dollars, but would not be an accurate reflection to give you an idea of the cost. And as Colleen mentioned, the existing adopted plan by the SANDAG board is 128 billion, is also in 2020 dollars. We did estimate in the last plan the expenditure year dollars, and we were way off. So we decided to do 2020 dollars to be just to give you a perspective on the cost. It will be possible to explain it, but it will be very highly inaccurate to do expenditure year dollars.
All right, just in my experience, that they've gotten very costly when the actual projects attempt to happen. And thanks for the presentation. I think it was, very futuristic, and I painted a clean picture for the future. I think that's great, but I was kind of disappointed on a few things. One, there was no mention in the 5 big moves that this board had prioritized previously scheduled investment of the 78, the 52, the 67, and the 94. That wasn't even in the definition for the 5 big moves. You did mention that some of these freeways, but not any way that they would be prioritized. So I'd like to, have maybe in the next presentation is how those, how we're going to fulfill those. That was voted on the board in last year on those particular corridors. And I was actually hoping for some modeling, but I guess you're going to do the modeling later, because I would have liked to seen the modeling on the managed lanes versus the HOV lanes, particularly on the 78 corridor, where you mentioned there'd be 4 managed lanes on the 78. However, you've got 2 definitions or 2 areas within the staff report that says the managed lanes are on page, I think the first one's on page 14, that managed lanes are situated either along freeway shoulders that have adequate widths or converted general purpose lanes that already exist. Folks up in North County, we've been paying for HOV lanes for the last 12 years, and we're going to be paying until 2048 for additional lanes. But these 4 managed lanes, even though you did show one stretch of the 78 that did have that capacity, a lot of that does not have a lot of the 78 does not have the capacity to just take away 2 lanes and from the freeway, from the shoulders. So basically those would all be general purpose lanes that would be converted. I don't think that's going to be a good set, for the people in North County. They've been paying for something and not getting it. And then potentially when you come back and ask for more money, then that's going to be, a heavy lift. Also in your definition of managed lanes, and I think this needs to be a discussion by the board, is managed lanes occupancy are going to be 3 or more people in a car, HOV 3+, and that it is assumed that all HOV lanes and managed lanes are going to be 3+ by 2025. I think this needs to be brought up to the board for discussion, and I would like to see when this comes to the board next week, to not just be a discussion, but also a discuss and advise so that potential action could be taken. Because this is a big change, changing HOVs from 2 to 3, and then assuming they're all going to be there by 2025, and that all managed lanes are going to be along those lines. So, it was a good presentation, but it was very San Diego, which is fine. I'm all for transit in the areas where the population's concentrated, but not so much for North County. Bicycles and Vespas and those types of things are not going to work in North County as well as they would in downtown San Diego. So I see, even if we meet the goals of 10% of the people using transit, you still got 90% of the people on roads. And I want to make sure that, that we have a regional plan and that we always talk about, And that regional plan should include roads for North County, particularly the four, and East County, particularly the 4 roads that were mentioned before. And I say that because I would love to see your vision realized. But if we're not going to complete promises, at least on those prioritized corridors, asking the people for more money again without delivering on past promises is going to be a real challenge for Sandag, and quite frankly, something I'm not going to be able to support. Or in North County, in North County, I'm going to drive it home that we're not getting what was promised from the last time. Why should we believe it this time? So I really want to see those prioritized corridors identified and brought out in this vision for the regional plan. So I'll end my comments, but I see some other people, I'm sure, want to comment on my comments here. Mayor Solis.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to ask with regards to the rollout plan for the 5 big moves. I know we will be receiving it as the board of directors, but I wanted to know what the thoughts were with, let's say, MTS or North County Transit, executive summary, of course, and sharing that the vision with our board. And then just to the comments of, where we want in the partnership with North County. I think there was definitely spaces that were pointed out where North County was very much brought out and, identified, and specific spots were there. So I would hope that, people keep an open mind and really have the dialogue and not make decisions when it does come to us, and be short-sighted when it comes to the decisions as a board, because we still haven't even fleshed out the ideas. So I think there's room for dialogue, but when we know that legislation is, again, I'm sure pending on what carpool lanes look like, what, so many things, moving parts, I think it's good that we start thinking longer term. And I'd be curious where that change was made, but whether or not we have to make a decision as a board to that end, whether it be 2 or 3 people in a carpool lane, I guess I don't necessarily think that that's as significant as, encouraging flexible fleets, or, really looking at the multimodal complete corridors, how that would make that much of a difference. So I'd be interested in the dialogue next week.
Okay, and then I see we got the, thank you, Vice Chair Jesus. I don't have your last name on the screen. Your supervisor from Imperial, and then we're going to go to the public comment. I want to get to them before 11:30. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair Desmond, for the opportunity. I congratulate you as an advisory board member. I'm extremely impressed by the preparation by Sandag staff of the information provided. I just have a couple quick comments. I know it's getting late. I'm going to divide my comments into 2 separate areas: people movement and goods movement. If we look into the people movement perspective, to start off, I echo Council Members Moreno's sentiment about looking at the people that are crossing the border on a daily basis with COVID-19, essential, non-essential, moving forward, people that go to school here legally, obviously, people that work here legally, obviously, people that transact in a business or personal or some nature on a consistent basis. And if you look at the people crossing the border, on any given day, it'd be the 2nd largest city in the county of San Diego, and historically, it'd probably be the 3rd largest city in the city of San Diego. So I think the focal point of looking at the Otay Mesa area is extremely important as you move forward with your vision of transportation. Again, I echo Council Members Moreno's comments about housing. If you look at your average housing in San Diego County, you're bordering on $600,000 for a single family residence or for a residence. And you look at the available space to construct, it's basically in multiple areas, and Otay Mesa would definitely be one of them, to really push affordable housing moving forward. And that would obviously translate into transportation moving forward. So from a people movement perspective, I think it's very important that you key into those potential areas, not just now, but obviously in the future. From a goods movement perspective, I really think there are 3 avenues that are not really fully exploited in this vision. The Port of San Diego, the Seaport of San Diego, I think if you look at the synergies that could be built between Ensenada, San Diego, and LA. Ensenada, very limited movement there. LA, there's no space for additional movement. It's an ongoing issue as we look at this this situation from a goods movement perspective. So that brings the Port of San Diego into becoming potentially a major player in the goods movement from a goods movement perspective. Right now, if you look at the major players, you have Dole, you have Cemex, you have auto industry. But again, it could definitely be an area that can be exploited from a goods movement perspective, which obviously translates into future transportation needs for that area. The other would be obviously the commercial port of entry in Otay, where again, you've got millions and millions of dollars rolling into San Diego County. A lot of that is actually going to Los Angeles. But if you can capture some of those funds, again, transportation would definitely be hit in a potential negative way, which would need to be addressed as you move forward. And finally, commercial airport. As we look at LA and the Port of LA, Long Beach, from a seaport perspective, you look at the San Diego airport and you look at its limitations. You look at CBX and it's basically been a home run from a tourist capture and people movement perspective, but you also can exploit that even further by looking at a commercial airport transportation hub by utilizing the airport in Tijuana as a commercial airport hub. And if you look at the Cali Baja region in and of itself, you can look at the potential that it creates between all the fruits and vegetables and goods that are produced in the Mexicali Valley area, in the states of Sonora, Sinaloa, and I'm not even touching Baja California, Tijuana, Ensenada, San Quintin, etc. And the manufacturing factor as well, where you've got over 1,000 manufacturing plants within a 100-mile radius south that can also use that just-in-time philosophy in a commercial airport hub. So I think, again, the Port of San Diego, the land port of Otay Mesa, and potentially the commercial development of commercial airport in the Tijuana Basin, similar to what CBX does for the passenger airport, creating a commercial hub with the airport of Tijuana could be tremendous from a good movement perspective, from an economic development perspective, and obviously from a visionary perspective, you'll have to take that into consideration when you look at a transportation plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Escobar. Good points for working regionally together. Appreciate that. We're going to go to the public speakers. If we could have the speakers raise their hands if they would like to speak. Tessa, do you have any idea how many speakers we have? I want to make sure we try to get them all in.
Thank you, Chair. We have 7 hands raised.
Okay.
8 now. The first, and several more are coming in at this time. But the first public speaker we have would be Tom Lemon.
Okay. Yeah, kind of let me know if we get a huge count because I want to make sure we get them all in if we have to limit time. But go ahead with Mr. Lemon. Thanks.
Hey, thanks so much for the opportunity to congratulate you guys on having such amazing vision. Brother Hassan is just killing it with what he's done in the past. He's looking way beyond into the future that's going to change San Diego regional transportation's needs and labor. And the folks that the San Diego Building Trades represents is happy to be a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lemon. Can we have our next speaker?
Gretchen Newsom.
Thank you. Gretchen Newsom speaking on behalf of over 3,400 members of IBEW 569. We wish to convey our sincere congratulations to SANDAG staff on today's major milestones. And we're looking forward to learning more about this exciting update and working with our partners in the Quality of Life Coalition to provide feedback. There may be some who would suggest that we need to pause or change course on this vital work underway. to transform our transportation future. And nothing could be further from the truth. Now more than ever, we need to move forward with a bold, radically different approach from the old, ineffective, and unjust way of transportation planning done in San Diego. Today and into the future, our region needs quality transit to better connect communities to good jobs and economic opportunities. We need to center transportation planning around social equity, environmental and racial justice, while combating the climate crisis. We also need safe walking and biking options. The pandemic has shown the stark inequalities in our region when it comes to these issues, and we need to do much better, and we can. We urge you to keep moving forward on the 5 big moves, and we look forward to continued collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you. That's
The next, I'm sorry, the next speaker is Rick Bates.
Okay, there. I think my microphone's unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yes, my name is Rick Bates, and I am a board member for Cleveland National Forest Foundation. And we would just like, as an organization that advocates acutely for GHG mitigation and VMT mitigation, we are interested in understanding what kind of benchmarks, climate progress benchmarks that this vision will do. I know that Colleen was talking about that there's modeling that needs to be done. And so we understand that. It's a great presentation, by the way. But part of the reason why we need to meet these benchmarks, these climate progress benchmarks, is because we're in a situation where some of the planning in San Diego, where people live, where housing has been developed, has contributed to exacerbating VMT and GHG. And so we're wondering, will this plan help to reconcile or mitigate the housing crisis? How does this connect with that? We know that this has been a challenge for years. One's a cause, one's a symptom, and it's been largely unsolved by our region's planning systems. In May of 2020, Save Our Forest and Ranch Lands, along with Cleveland National Forest Foundation, sent to Sandag a climate, housing, and transit alternative, citing all these benchmarks and documenting step by step how to meet and solve the housing crisis as well as the climate crisis together through a mode shift to transit, beginning with an area complete transit bike and walk system. And so the questions I have is how does this vision, how will this help the plan quantitatively meet the state and local benchmarks for both housing and the climate progress? And also, how does this vision help the plan compare, or does it compare to the climate, housing, and transit alternative that we submitted back in May?
Colleen, did you want to comment briefly?
Sure, I'm happy to. Thank you for the questions, Mr. Bates. Two things. First of all, I guess the first thing I have to say is there's so much detail that we could or could not include in the presentation today. We really didn't talk about land use at all. Land use is a key component. And so really the way we solve our housing crisis is looking at all the opportunities for housing in our mobility hubs as a start. And we also have to, by law, assume that the regional housing needs assessment is included in this plan. The way we're able to meet the climate goals also is by focusing our growth and development in the western third of the region. That's been the long-standing policy in our regional plans. And as we're able to preserve the backcountry, that land preservation also helps us with carbon sequestration and further helps us meet climate goals. So all of those things together with investments in alternative modes of transportation are what help us meet the mandates and also help local jurisdictions implement their climate action plans. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Our next speaker, please.
Our next speaker is a phone number. The last 3 digits are 046.
Hello.
Hey, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Great. Good morning, chairs, committee members, and SANDAG staff. My name is Noah Harris, Transportation Policy Advocate with Climate Action Campaign. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comment on this exciting next step for the 2021 regional plan. I want to begin by emphasizing that every San Diegan deserves access to high quality transportation and economic mobility, and today that does not exist. COVID-19 and the economic crisis have only further revealed the unacceptable inequalities that have plagued our communities for far too long. The data your team has published is devastating. Over 2/3 of Black and Latinx San Diegans live in areas with higher than average unemployment, and 1/2 live in areas with higher rates of COVID-19. As regional leaders, it is your responsibility to redress these inequalities. The next regional transportation plan provides SANDAG with the chance to finally build world-class transit that is climate safe, accessible to all, and promotes racial and economic justice. We urge SANDAG, do not stray the course. Despite the sudden and tragic consequences of the coronavirus crisis, our region urgently needs transportation solutions that address poor air quality, seriously reduce VMT and greenhouse gas emissions towards state climate goals, and stops climate change. The climate crisis looms large, and racial disparities in health and opportunity continue to widen. We must take bold action now to build a greener, healthier, prosperous, and more just future in San Diego for decades to come. Thank you, and congrats on the great presentation today.
Thank you. Tessa, just keep them coming.
Yes, sir. The next speaker is David Grubb.
Good morning, Chair Desmond and committee members. This is David Grubb, Transportation Chair of Sierra Club San Diego, speaking for our over 40,000 Sierra Club members and supporters in San Diego County. I'd like to express our appreciation to your staff for a new vision for the future of transportation in the San Diego region and a new collaborative approach to developing the regional plan. This is a huge improvement over the adversarial relationship that prevailed in the past when we successfully sued SANDAG to get a bad plan rescinded. We look forward to continuing and expanding our relationship with SANDAG as the planning process continues. Not least, we thank the board for supporting the excellent work of your staff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Craig Jones.
Unmute. Very good. Am I on?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. I submitted my comments ahead of time by email, so each of the committee members today should have received them ahead of time, but I would like to put them forward for some reply. First of all, the comment by Ms. Alicio, I appreciate very much. None of this is going to work. We're not going to control greenhouse gases or really provide for transportation equity if we don't control sprawl in this region. SANDAG has to get more active and proactive in addressing the sprawl issue of our region. But for my specific questions, it looks like the complete corridors to be developed are planned to use the existing freeway and highway rights-of-way. Are there services and routes, whether rail or true bus rapid transit, that would not follow existing freeways and highways? If existing auto freeways and highways are exclusively to be used, I see this as a significant barrier to an effective system, since automobile freeways don't interface efficiently or effectively with either residential communities or employment centers. That's my first question, if it could be addressed, and then I'll have my second.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, did you want us to respond to the question?
Yeah, if you could briefly, please.
Okay, and I'm going to call on Jennifer Williamson. Jennifer, if you could just highlight the Next Generation Rapid and really explaining how that operates, and it's not just in freeways.
Yes, so thank you for that question. We worked hard on our next generation rapid, and part of what we're looking at is, utilizing existing infrastructure with a much higher level of priority. And we've seen this achieved along El Cajon Boulevard, where the city of San Diego was very progressive and provided us with a shoulder lane that is used exclusively for our bus rapid transit system. So we'd be looking at doing something along those lines. However, the commuter rail does not follow the freeway at all. It's designed to be grade separated. So we would look to provide direct access via tunnels or on bridges to get to the heart of our employment centers and connect population and employment centers together.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It sounds like you might have already addressed my second question too, which is what is Next Gen Rapid Bus? Hopefully on exclusive travelways and fully separated from automobile traffic, so it doesn't get bogged down in congestion.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Tessa.
I'm sorry, I thought I was unmuted. The next speaker is Paul Jameson.
Yeah, I'm Paul Jameson. I'm a volunteer board member for Bike San Diego. Hassan and your team, I just wanted to thank you for this very impressive presentation. It's a holistic vision with multiple robust and safe transit modes. I'm a little confused over the disconnect between this forward-looking plan and the sort of backward-looking fixation from some of the committee members about keeping promises to voters from 2004. The argument that we need to widen freeways and increase greenhouse gas emissions before we can move forward with the greenhouse gas reduction steps in this plan kind of ignores the current realities of climate change and sprawl and transportation equity. So we also heard several times during the presentation about the necessity of safe facilities for bicyclists, particularly children getting to school, and last mile solutions for public transit. But unfortunately, the chair of this committee has repeatedly attacked bike lane funding and even used factually incorrect statements in those attacks. So I ask that we can kind of all work together, find ways that we can move forward together and not backward first. And thank you for the time.
All right, thank you very much.
The next speaker is Nancy Ewan.
Hello.
Hello, Nancy.
Hello. I'm calling in because one of the comments that was made by, I think it was the chair of the Transportation Committee, what seemed to focus on expanding roadways. And I thought one of the points of a unified transportation plan was to minimize the use of single occupation vehicles. And what I'd like to know is how much of a reduction in single occupancy vehicles do you foresee when the plan is fully implemented?
I think that may come out in the modeling, which hasn't been done yet.
Well, has any pre-work been done to kind of get an idea of where that information might come?
Colleen, I don't think it has been. Colleen, if you want to weigh in briefly on that.
Yeah, I think, overall, we're trying to get a large percentage of people not driving alone. So at least, 7 to 10%. How that equates to the reduction in the number of vehicles, the Transportation Committee Chair is correct that will come out more in the modeling.
But if the goal is only 7 to 10%, that's not enough to reduce greenhouse gases.
All right. Thank you very much. All right.
Our next speaker is Alistair Visuet.
Oh, you almost got it. It's a Visuet, but thank you. I'm just a resident and a community member. I don't represent any specific group. I just wanted to provide my insight as a member of the community. I really love the plan. I've been able to see it grow over the last 2 years as an engaged student in San Diego. And I just want to highlight some of the things that I think it might lack in terms of how, or just in terms of some things that community members will be interested in. There's a lot of focus on very future forward, very high vision, and I love to see that. It makes me proud to be a San Diegan that we can like dream this big and look this far forward to improve transit equity in San Diego. But I think there's also a lot to be gained by smaller, more concrete statistics that people will appreciate seeing. Things like very specific frequency targets for transit. I know that there's like a lot of horror stories in the Northeast where large infrastructure projects will happen for bus stations and then they'll serve one bus every hour. So knowing that like on top of all of these larger high vision moves, we'll be able to see concrete goals for increases in frequency, increases in like safety and security and accommodations on transit. But overall, just as a community member, I want to thank everyone who's been working on this project. I love to see it. It makes me proud to be a San Diegan.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Michael G.
Hi, thank you so much. I appreciate your time, and yeah, great presentation. I think I really like the plan. It's very futuristic. It's really really got a lot of modern elements to it. Obviously, it's going to be a very long time to get implemented, and it will be very expensive. You did mention in your plan there about private and public fleets, and I did want to mention that to bring private fleets in, we could actually do that sooner than later. Private companies to come in that could fill in the gaps. For example, Miramar Road has no bus service whatsoever. I've worked up there and I was kind of dumbfounded that there was no way to get there back and forth. So anyway, there's lots of places where those could fill in. They wouldn't cost the city very much. They would provide jobs all over the city, especially in equity neighborhoods. And they would also reduce congestion. They would drop highway casualties, 12 people into a passenger van, say like a super shuttle type van. Those are very comfortable, large. From 12 cars, 12 people there is going to wipe out 60% of emissions. We can get that going now. It can be deployed very soon. So anyway, just wanted to mention that could get kind of thought into the mix. That could even provide a model as these companies fill in these location and gaps that this system could kind of form around when it wants to bring in this more modern technology, this, the trains and the other things, and see what kind of flow is. Would actually help this, I think, this thing to get realized, dropping costs and providing an infrastructure now for us, as well as providing some modeling for it. So I just want to throw that out there and Sandra could consider that. It would be great so we could get something going now. Appreciate that. Thank you so much for all your work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Nicole Burgess.
Good morning, Sandag. Thank you, Chair Desmond and board, for all being here. Kudos to you, Hassan, and staff, Colleen, Marissa, Antoinette, all of you. Wonderful work, a wonderful plan. I echo so many of your voices out there on the board. Yes, urban sprawl has to be eliminated. We have to stop that. Yes, to military bases being considered employment areas. Those are highly traffic areas. Yes to partnerships and collaboration. So look forward to you working with you further. As mentioned, I'm a board member of Bike SD as part of Quality of Life Coalition. Super excited to hear a human-centric approach. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you for adding that, bringing that to the table. As we've seen in the last year, we have had a 100% increase in bike ridership in the last few months. Really has brought that to attention. We are eliminating parking spaces to provide spaces for people to dine outside, eat outside, walk outside. San Diego is an optimal, beautiful place, and really just want to send the gratitude to Sandag for bringing all those variables and really addressing some of those important things. And like you mentioned, flexible heat fleets, the iOS, the technology, some of these things are just going to happen in the next decade. And so really how we adapt and move forward and collaborate and look forward to transforming our region and look forward to moving better. And I love to ride my bike through North County. So San Marcos is one of my favorite beautiful places for our millennials and the school, just, the university to be a walkable, bikeable area. And so hub hopping is our future, and hub and get on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole.
Our next speaker and last speaker is Marissa Borquez.
Hello, how's everyone doing? Again, I just wanted to thank the board for really taking into consideration a future where, there's something other than the car. So really congratulations on looking forward to the future and ensuring that we have a future to give to our kids and our grandkids. One of the things that I just want to comment on today, I know we've mentioned safety a lot of times, but I really want us to really go above and beyond just thinking about safety while we're on the vehicle and start thinking about the safety considerations from walking to your house to these mobility hubs, because this type of regional transit does not work unless people feel safe to walk from point A to point B to these different mobility options. So I really think that if possible, having a larger incorporation of Vision Zero as being part of this presentation and making sure that we have that human scale and focus, even down to the transit centers themselves. If it's going to take me, 5 minutes to walk from one massive side of the station to this other massive side of the station, I'm going to be less likely to use that transit. So really considering the human scale of everything, and that this is a big, huge regional plan, and it is pretty freaking amazing, I have to admit. But at the same time, we're really talking about people walking. That's what this is all intrinsic on. And that is what makes, regional transit work. So just take those things into consideration. All right. Thank you, guys.
All right. Thank you very much. Now my video's not working for some reason. Lucky you. That concludes our item for today. We have continued public comments. Tessa, do we have any continued public comments?
There are no hands raised for continued public comments.
Do we have any member public comments? No. I would just ask that when this is brought back next Friday to the board, that this be a discuss and advise option, so that we have the option to take action if we so choose to at the next meeting. So with that, I'd like to thank my fellow chairs, Mayor Salas and Mayor Dedina, for this joint meeting today, the Regional Planning, Transportation, and Border meeting. Our next Transportation Committee meeting is for Friday, September 4th. The next meeting of Regional Planning is scheduled for Friday, also September 4th. And the next Borders Committee meeting is scheduled for Friday, August 28th, 12:30 p.m. There's no other input. Gone. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.